What kind of cable actress with a decent but limited TV paycheck ends up moving in the same circles as billionaires, power players, and Middle Eastern royalty? That question keeps hanging over Meghan's past. And once people start pulling on it, the polished picture around her early rise begins to look a lot less simple. Sources described Meghan's response to Tom Bower's claims as unusually tense, not her usual silence, and not a clean legal denial either. There was said to be a hard push to tear down Bower's methods and discredit the story before it spread further. But that move seemed to backfire, because the more her side pushed back, the more people started looking closely at the numbers for themselves. At the centre of Bower's case is one big issue: money. During her years on Suits, Meghan was reportedly earning around $50,000 per episode. That is strong money by normal standards, no question. But critics say it still does not explain the level of luxury attached to her image between 2011 and 2016. Old sightings, travel chatter, and social media breadcrumbs placed her around yacht scenes in the Mediterranean, especially near Monaco and the French Riviera, where even a short luxury stay can cost a fortune. And that is before adding the extras. Fuel, crew, docking fees, designer clothes, first-class flights, and five-star hotels in London and New York push the cost even higher. That is why critics say the math never looked clean. To them, Meghan did not seem like just an actress living well. She looked like someone moving through a much richer and more exclusive social circuit, with access that may have been opened by other people. The clash with Bower became even more intense when reports claimed Meghan tried to manage how parts of her past were discussed during the 2021 Oprah interview. Later commentary suggested the full recordings included more than what the public saw, including material tied to her earlier networking years. Those claims remain claims and should be treated carefully. Still, they added a new credibility problem to an already heated debate. That is where the irony hit hard for critics. Meghan has often framed herself as someone speaking truth against powerful institutions, yet critics argue that parts of her own story may also have been tightly controlled. In Bower's version, the pressure was not only coming from the monarchy or the press, it was coming from Meghan herself, from a need to protect the image she wanted the world to accept. He pushes the idea that Meghan wanted to be seen as the innocent outsider, the American woman who stumbled into royal life without fully knowing what she was entering. But his research argues the opposite. He paints her as highly strategic, someone who had spent years trying to enter elite circles and build links to people with status, wealth, and influence. That is the version that keeps fueling this argument. Critics also reject the idea that palace hesitation was simply about Meghan being an actress. In fact, there has long been chatter that William and Catherine knew Suits, liked the show, and were initially interested in meeting her. According to this view, the frost came later for another reason. Not because she came from Hollywood, but because palace teams allegedly saw red flags in the luxury access, the social ties, and the changing details around her past. That is why this story keeps circling back to 2006. Meghan was still a small figure then, known more for briefcase girl visibility and early industry hustle than serious star power. But critics say that was the period when she learned the real rules of Hollywood. Talent matters, but access matters more. And in their view, she began building that access early. One of the most repeated episodes from that era is a Hamptons event she reportedly attended while still far from major fame. It was not the kind of room built for random struggling actors. It was the kind of room filled with serious money and influence. Bower uses that moment to argue that Meghan was already moving beyond the usual Hollywood ladder and into a higher social world. That does not prove misconduct by itself, but critics say it shows how early she was entering spaces most actresses at her level could not easily reach. He also points to the old Screen Actors Guild issue involving the pilot Century City. Meghan was reportedly said to have claimed she was already in the union when she was not. Some people would dismiss that as basic Hollywood hustle, but critics say it matters because it suggests a willingness to bend facts to get inside closed systems. To them, it fits a larger pattern. The rules were obstacles, and the story could be adjusted if that helped open the next door. Then came the TIG, and this is where the contrast between income and image got even louder. Publicly, the blog was presented as a lifestyle passion project about food, travel, and taste. But critics argue it also worked as a clean explanation for luxury perks and polished international access that looked bigger than a normal blog could justify at that time. Free stays and influencer perks are one thing. A steady pattern of premium travel, elite clubs, and high-end surroundings is another. This is also where Marcus Anderson and Soho House become major names in the conversation. Bauer argues that Anderson helped Meghan move through a much more exclusive network, one built on private clubs, wealthy guests, and powerful introductions. While her Suits castmates were living fairly grounded lives in Toronto, Meghan appeared to be moving through London, Berlin, Istanbul, and other sleek locations tied to quiet wealth and elite social access. For critics, that is the real point. They say Meghan was not just rising as an actress. She was being positioned as a woman of international status, someone who looked at home in rooms that her resume alone may not have opened. The blog helped smooth that image out. If anyone asked about the luxury, the answer could always be simple: it was for the blog. But skeptics say that explanation only went so far. Production gossip from Suits has also added to the legend around this period. There were whispers of diva behavior, special demands, premium catering, and image-conscious requests that seemed out of line with her place on the call sheet. Set gossip should always be handled carefully, of course, but critics use it to support another point. Meghan was not just building a career. She was building a status identity, rehearsing a bigger role long before royal life ever appeared. That is the D-list paradox critics keep talking about. On paper, she was still a mid-level actress. In appearance, she looked closer to A-list. To them, that gap did not happen by accident. They argue it was sustained by access, networking, and a carefully managed image that made the life look bigger than the job. By 2013 and 2014, critics say that pattern became even more visible. Meghan's movements looked more polished, more international, and more connected to powerful social circles. One chapter that gets heavy attention is her month-long stay in New York in September 2013, while Suits was still filming in Toronto. Traveling during breaks is normal, sure, but what later drew attention was the level of luxury linked to that stay and the question of who was paying for it. According to reports, Meghan was in some of Manhattan's most expensive five-star settings, the kind of places where a suite can eat through a huge amount of income. That alone proves nothing improper. But critics say that when moments like this pile up again and again, they stop looking like lucky upgrades and start looking like a pattern of invisible support. The New York chapter drew even more interest because it overlapped with the presence of Prince Andrew in the city. That overlap is not proof of contact and should not be treated like it is. But critics and commentators point to the wider social ecosystem around elite Manhattan gatherings, private hosting networks, and carefully shielded introductions. Their question is less about whether Meghan met any one person directly, and more about who was opening these doors and why she appeared so comfortable inside that world. That is why this fight with Bauer still carries so much heat. He is not only challenging details, he is challenging Meghan's whole origin story. Her supporters see her as a targeted outsider who was judged unfairly. Her critics see someone far more strategic, far more image-aware, and far more connected than she later admitted. That gap between those two stories is exactly what keeps this drama alive. And once you strip away the glossy interviews, the brand language, and the carefully polished retelling, the same question keeps coming back louder than ever. Was this simply ambition? Or was it a carefully managed climb through a world built on discreet invitations, silent sponsors, quiet arrangements, and private entrances? What happens when Meghan starts showing up in elite spaces again and again, but almost none of it seems to exist on the public record? That is where this next chapter gets serious. In October 2014, the spotlight moved to Dublin for the One Young World Summit, and critics say this was a major turning point in how Meghan began presenting herself to the world. She did not arrive looking like just another actress from a legal drama. She arrived with the image of a rising global voice, and that is exactly what raised eyebrows. Commentators tied to Tom Bauer's reporting argue that the level of treatment she received looked far bigger than her fame at that moment. A lot of attention has centered on John Fitzpatrick, the well-known Irish hotelier and philanthropist, who was said to have supported Meghan with high-end hospitality and access to influential circles. That support became a major talking point because critics kept asking the same question. Why would someone of that stature roll out such serious treatment for a supporting actress from a cable drama? In Bauer's version, this was part of what he calls a facilitator network, a circle of wealthy, connected people who could help ambitious figures move into more prestigious worlds. Whether one sees that as normal networking or something more strategic depends on perspective, but the question has never really gone away. To critics, Dublin was more than a conference stop. They say it looked like Meghan was testing a new public identity, less TV actress and more international advocate. That is why this moment gets so much attention in these narratives. It was presented not as a random appearance, but as a rehearsal for a much bigger role to come, with powerful people helping create the setting around her. Another part of this story that keeps coming back is the money issue. Critics have long pointed to Meghan's Mediterranean appearances during breaks from Suits, saying her digital footprint and old social chatter placed her in luxury spaces that seemed hard to explain with a TV salary alone. High-end yachts, private beach clubs, and exclusive Monaco scenes do not come cheap at all. And that is the gap Bauer keeps pressing. A luxury yacht in the French Riviera can cost more in 1 week than many people make in years, especially once food, fuel, drinks, and crew are added in. Exclusive clubs and private villa parties are not usually accessed by simply buying a ticket either. Critics say those spaces run on introductions, not cash alone. That is why Bauer argues Meghan was mastering the art of being the ideal guest, someone charming, polished, and discreet enough to be welcomed into elite settings without personally paying the full price of that lifestyle. But in that version of the story, there is a catch. If your access depends on private hosts, then total discretion becomes part of the deal. And that is why some critics link this issue back to the Oprah interview. They argue that any serious discussion of who opened those doors would have badly damaged the independent, self-made image Meghan wanted to project. Those claims remain disputed, of course, but they are a major part of the larger argument around narrative control. Critics also push back hard on the idea that the royal family's concerns were simply about Meghan being an actress. According to this line of thinking, the palace had no problem with entertainment backgrounds on their own. The real concern, they argue, came from vetting. When Harry's relationship became serious, palace teams were said to have looked into Meghan's travel history and social links between 2013 and 2015. What they reportedly saw, according to Bauer and other commentators, was a pattern of unexplained luxury, high-level introductions, and travel arrangements that did not fit neatly into the public story. That is why some critics say William's caution was not about Meghan being American, divorced, or from Hollywood. They frame it instead as institutional concern, the reaction of a future king and a palace machine that had seen enough odd details to start asking harder questions. Supporters strongly reject that interpretation, but it remains a powerful part of the anti-Meghan narrative. By 2021, Meghan had fully transformed from television actress into global celebrity, and the Oprah interview was meant to define that new version of her once and for all. But later commentary in 2026 claimed the interview the public saw may have been a cleaned-up version of a much larger conversation. Reports suggested there was much more footage than what aired, with some of the sharpest editing allegedly happening around Meghan's earlier social links and pre-royal connections. One name critics keep returning to is Marcus Anderson and the Soho House network. According to insiders quoted in these narratives, the original discussion may have given a more detailed picture of how Meghan moved through London's social scene before Harry, but those details were allegedly stripped out. Critics say that if the public had seen the fuller version, Meghan's entry into royal life might have looked less like fate and more like careful positioning. That is why Bauer and others also bring up her 2017 Vanity Fair profile. In that interview, Meghan repeated the well-known story about writing to Procter & Gamble as a child to challenge a sexist ad. Critics say fact-checkers struggled to fully confirm the story as she told it, and that the experience may have taught Meghan a bigger lesson about controlling the final version of her public image. By the time she sat down with Oprah, critics argue she knew exactly how important it was to protect the narrative at all costs. In their view, the most sensitive issue was not just palace conflict, It was Meghan's earlier lifestyle, travel, and the people who may have helped elevate her before she became a duchess. Critics say those questions were especially dangerous because they clashed with the image of a woman who had built everything by grit, activism, and hard work alone. So in this telling, the Oprah interview was not just about attacking palace structures. It was about burying the old version of Meghan and locking in a new one. That brings the story right back to Marcus Anderson. If this whole rise were a slick social thriller, critics would cast him as the quiet operator in the background. As a Soho House executive, his role involved putting the right people in the same room. Bauer argues that Anderson saw Meghan's potential early and helped guide her through elite spaces with more polish and precision than most actresses at her level could ever dream of. Not just introductions, but access, and that is why his name stays in the frame. Critics say Anderson gave Meghan a bridge into private rooms in London, Toronto, and Istanbul, places where influential people could meet far away from cameras and headlines. In that version of events, he was not just a friend in the background, he was a key part of the social structure that helped Meghan move through powerful circles, with all the private codes, discreet meetings, and carefully managed access that came with private rooms in London, Istanbul, and Toronto, where she could meet power brokers away from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. What made Meghan stand out in that private world was not just access, it was how carefully the whole setup shaped her image. She was not being presented as just another actress chasing attention. She was being built up as a woman of mystery, polish, and importance, someone who looked like she belonged in powerful rooms long before the public ever caught on. The version sold to the world was simple enough. Harry and Meghan met on a blind date at Soho House on Dean Street. Clean, romantic, easy to repeat. But Tom Bauer's research into the Soho House setup pushes a much more managed version of that story. In his telling, this was not some random spark. It was a controlled encounter, arranged in the kind of private setting where every detail could be managed from start to finish. Room 7, a private area inside the club, has been described as the real stage for that first key introduction. Bauer argues that Marcus Anderson helped shape the timing, the atmosphere, and even the social comfort around the meeting. By placing Meghan in a private club Harry already trusted, and by having the introduction backed by someone Harry knew well, the whole thing instantly felt safer, smoother, and more natural than it might have otherwise. That is the part critics keep stressing. Harry did not see a woman surrounded by rumours of years spent moving through elite circles. He saw someone vouched for by a trusted friend. In these rarefied social spaces, that kind of endorsement matters more than almost anything else. A recommendation from a gatekeeper like Anderson carries real weight, and Bauer treats that as one of the most important factors in how Meghan gained such quick acceptance inside Harry's world. The scale of Anderson's importance became even more obvious to observers at the 2018 royal wedding. People noticed how prominently he was seated, in a position that looked strikingly intimate, even unusually close, compared with some of Harry's own longtime friends from Eton. That detail did not go unnoticed at all. For critics, it looked like a loud signal of where Meghan's loyalty sat and who still mattered most in the circle around her. Bauer reads that moment as a statement. In his view, Meghan kept Anderson close because he knew the full, unpolished story of her rise. He was there for the Toronto period, the travel years, the social climbing chatter, the rebrand, and the whole climb from television actress to royal fiancée. By holding on to Anderson, while Harry's old crowd seemed to drift further away, critics say the couple protected the edited public version of Meghan's past and kept tighter control over the story in circulation. That is where tabloids started throwing around names like the Soho House Mafia, a phrase meant to capture the closed, protective, well-connected circle that seemed to form around Meghan. Dramatic name or not, it stuck for a reason. To critics, Soho House was not just a stylish members club. It was a shield, a private ecosystem where introductions could happen quietly, where luxury looked casual, and where questions about background could hit a wall fast. Investigative voices tied to this theory have long suggested that some of Meghan's private travel between 2012 and 2015, including yacht trips and high-end social appearances, overlapped with people linked to Soho House or wealthy consultants moving in that orbit. In that reading, these trips could be framed as networking, lifestyle research, or blog-related opportunities, which made them sound harmless and professional instead of socially strategic. That framing mattered a lot, because once luxury gets wrapped in branding language, it starts sounding less suspicious and more aspirational. Bauer's supporters say Anderson's greatest value was not just access, but discretion. He understood how high-end rooms work. He understood that if the right person invites you, people stop asking too many questions. That kind of social cover, critics argue, allowed Meghan to maintain the salary of a television actress while appearing to move through a world built for billionaires. Soho House, with its secrecy, private rooms, and culture of selective visibility, became the perfect lab for that kind of transformation. This is why critics reject Meghan's Oprah, framing that palace tensions came down mainly to her being a strong and independent woman. Their argument is much colder and much more strategic. They say the friction began because palace officials realized Marcus Anderson was not just a friend in the background. In their view, he was functioning like a parallel image machine, one built on exclusivity, privacy, and relationships rather than royal tradition or public accountability. The palace works through history, hierarchy, and formal vetting. Anderson's world works through access, trust, and NDAs. That clash, according to critics, was inevitable, and when William and Catherine, who by many accounts had actually been positive about Meghan at first, tried to understand more about her background, they allegedly ran into the same problem again and again: silence, closed doors, and a social world that did not operate by palace rules. That is why, in this version of the story, the real concern was never Meghan's acting career. It was the fear that the monarchy was not just welcoming a new family member, but opening the door to a highly polished, highly commercial, highly strategic network that valued influence and access over duty and transparency. That is the core of Bauer's criticism, and it runs through this whole investigation like a live wire. By 2026, those criticisms had exploded into something much bigger. What began years earlier as whispers, side-eyes, and scattered reports had by then turned into a full re-examination of the Sussex narrative. This final stage of the argument combines Bauer's long-running claims with fresh scrutiny over the Oprah era, leaked production concerns, and the repeated question of how much of Meghan's public identity was carefully assembled rather than naturally formed. At the center of it all is one major conclusion pushed by Bauer's side. Meghan's rise was not a string of lucky breaks. It was a carefully engineered climb. From the Hamptons in 2006, to New York in 2013, to Dublin in 2014, critics say the same pattern appears again and again: elite facilitators, unexplained generosity, and a level of social access that looked far larger than what a cable actress would normally command on her own. The money issue still hits hardest. In an industry where salaries are known, travel can be tracked, and public records often tell their own story, critics argue that the gap between a reported $50,000 per episode income and a visible Mediterranean luxury lifestyle was simply too large to ignore. They say this was not a minor detail. It was the main clue. Not proof of every rumour, of course, but a glaring contradiction that kept feeding public suspicion. That is why Bauer uses the yacht narrative not just as gossip, but as shorthand for a certain kind of social mobility, one where access is granted through charm, usefulness, social polish, and discretion. In that world, the most valuable currency is not necessarily money. It is who can bring you into the room, who can vouch for you, and who can keep quiet after the fact. The 2026 leaks only threw more fuel on that fire. Critics claimed that images from Monaco and the French Riviera, along with renewed focus on old timelines and edited interviews, gave the public a sharper view of parts of Meghan's past that had long been blurred, softened, or left out entirely. Whether every claim holds or not, the effect was the same. The polished version of the story started taking serious hits. One of the biggest corrections in the public discussion involved William and Catherine. For years, many people accepted the idea that they had been cold, snobbish, or dismissive toward Meghan from the start. But critics say a different picture emerged from palace accounts and biographers. According to that view, William and Catherine actually liked suits and were genuinely open at first. The real chill only began when palace vetting raised concerns. And those concerns, in the critics' telling, had nothing to do with looking down on an actress. Palace teams allegedly saw patterns that troubled them: long New York hotel stays during filming breaks, ties to elite circles, aggressive internet cleanup before the engagement, and a background that seemed harder to pin down the more they checked. In this version, the palace was not rejecting Meghan's profession. It was reacting to the network and inconsistencies around her. That is why critics say Meghan's claim that the palace wanted to control her may have flipped the real story on its head. They argue the palace was trying to verify her, not erase her, and that Meghan saw verification itself as a threat because it could crack the self-made fairy tale she had already sold to Harry and then to the world. That is a brutal claim, but it sits right at the center of this whole argument. The same pattern, critics say, showed up again in the Oprah interview and even earlier in the Vanity Fair fact-checking drama over the Procter & Gamble story. Why be so defensive about details from the past if the story was always solid? Bauer's psychological theory is that Meghan feared not exposure of a crime, but exposure of ordinariness. She could not be seen as too average, too hustle-driven, too Hollywood, too dependent on connections. She had to be exceptional from the start, a future duchess with a ready-made legend behind her. That need to keep refining the past, critics argue, created a dangerous house of cards. Every interview needed another adjustment. Every new platform needed another layer of cleanup. Every challenge had to be reframed as prejudice, cruelty, or misunderstanding. And by 2026, they say, the contradictions had piled up too high to ignore anymore. In the end, this whole argument lands on one hard lesson. In the digital age, people can polish, edit, and spin a story for a long time, but the original trail rarely stays buried forever. Old images come back. Old timelines get revisited. Old relationships get re-examined. And once that starts happening, the fairy tale begins to look a whole lot more like strategy. So that is the final question hanging over Meghan's rise. Was this all just smart ambition and modern image building? Or was it something much more calculated from the very start? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this one still splits people right down the middle. And if you want more deep dives into royal drama, hidden timelines, and the stories behind the headlines, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one.